Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on attachment of earnings in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Alice, and I'm going to be hosting and delivering the session today. A little look at what we'll be covering today too. So I am going to begin with an introduction to attachments and the different attachment types that can be set up in Sage 50 Payroll. We'll then talk about working out how much to deduct, so whether that's a specific amount or a calculated amount from the attachment tables. We'll then see how to set up and assign attachments to your employees, processing attachments, and also seeing how they look on the pay slips. And we'll finish up with a bit of a quiz at the end, just an optional thing to end on a little bit of fun there. Only a couple of questions, but just to test your knowledge there on what we've covered. So that is what we've got in store. But let's kick off that first section then. So firstly, what is an attachment of earnings? Well, an attachment of earnings is something that's issued under a court order to make payment of debts by direct deductions from, in this case, the employee's earnings. The type of attachment, length of the attachment, and the way that it's deducted, this will be communicated to you via the information that you'll receive in the court order or issuing authority. In Sage 50 Payroll, there are 17 different attachment types that you can have. They all relate to different debt deduction orders that you might receive from a court. And I just want to kind of go through a little bit about what they are. So I have grouped them together just to show you what they are. They kind of cover 5 broad categories. But you can see the list of 17 on the right-hand side there. So let's take a look at those categories that I've put them into. So firstly is debt deductions. Now these are references number 1, 4 and 12. They're classed as priority and non-priority, and that will be made clear on the information that you receive whether they are or whether they're not. But these attachments are 1971 priority, 1971 non-priority, or the fines enforcement attachment too. So that is an attachment that has tables to calculate the amounts, which we'll talk about in a little while. You've also got child maintenance attachments. So these are references number 2, or more commonly reference number 14. So that is Child Support 2012. The main difference between these two is that Child Support 2012 uses something called a protected earnings of 60% instead of a specified amount, which the other child support attachment does. The next attachments, these relate to community charge or council tax debt. Community charge is the official name for poll tax from the 90s, so they're not very common at all nowadays, but they are references 5 and 6. And then you've also got council tax attachments as well. So these relate to all different council tax debts, reference 7, with the exception of Welsh council tax, which does have its own category there at the bottom with reference number 17. Scottish earnings arrestments, these are going to fall into references 8, 9 and 10. And then you've also got more recent attachment types, so benefit debt deductions, for example, otherwise known as direct earnings attachments. These are references 15 and 16. So there is a normal rate, DEA, and a higher rate, DEA as well. DEA just means direct earnings attachment, so you might hear me say that a couple of times during the webinar. Now you can find out more about this just by following the link at the bottom of this slide on the handout, but yeah, just a bit of an introduction to those different types of attachments, a few of which we'll be talking about today. So moving on to working out how much to deduct for an attachment. So you have got those different types of attachments. There are 2 ways that the attachment type would be deducted. The first way would be that the order has something called a normal deduction rate, so a specific amount that needs to be deducted each period. And often with these attachments, they will also have something called protected earnings. So this is an amount that the deduction must not reduce the employee's net pay below. So let's say the protected earnings for an employee was £1,200. The attachment itself, it wouldn't be able to deduct an amount that would take the employee's net pay below that £1,200. So as a result, if there was some of the attachment that couldn't be deducted because of that protected earnings, in some cases it could carry that extra amount forward into the next period and then of course deduct that if the protected earnings allowed. And I will be showing an example of that a bit later. There is also the option to set up an admin fee where you can deduct £1 per attachment towards your costs. Totally optional with this one, but it does come off the employee. Yeah, I'll show you where you'll be able to set that up if necessary. And then just a bit about the image on this slide as well. So this is an image of a CAPS attachment, and that is a type of attachment that it would tell you how much to deduct each period. It would also often tell you what the protected earnings are too. So that is one way that the attachment could deduct, so the normal deduction rate with protected earnings. The other way to calculate an attachment deduction is attachment of earnings tables. Now this is usually using tables with bands for either weekly or monthly paid employees, and it's usually going to be a percentage of those earnings to deduct for the attachment. I do have a screenshot here of an example, just using a council tax attachment. So these tables are for monthly and weekly employees, and these tables are also found in Sage 50 Payroll, just in the company legislation. So if we just focus on that left-hand table, the weekly deduction rates for now, let's say an employee's attachable pay was £280 per week. The deduction rate would actually fall into the second last row here on the left table. So it's £280 that they're getting paid per week, fall into this category, and this would mean that the deduction rate for the attachment would be 12% towards the council tax debt. So the good thing with these tables is that these are built into the programme already, and as I say, you'll find these in the company legislation. So depending on the attachment type, Payroll will refer to these tables in the legislation, and then we'll work out how much to deduct for you if the attachment type uses tables. So I do just want to show you where you'll be able to find these in the programme now. So let's bring up Payroll, and you'll be able to find these by going to the company section. And then just on the left here, you've got an option for legislation. Now this holds all of the legislation for all different types of things, whether that's tax, national insurance, you've got your student loans, postgraduate loans, etc. But this tab here, AEO rates, or attachment of earnings orders rates, if we click on that, this is where we'll be able to check those tables. Now not all of the attachments have tables. As we can see, we've currently got 1971 priority selected, but there is no tables for that one. But just using this drop down, we've got all of those other different attachment types in here. Let me just click one that I know does have tables. So if we go to council tax, for example, I can see that come up for them. So I've selected that on the drop down. I'm just going to double check that I've got the most recent effective from rates there. So from 2007. And yeah, these are the banded earnings and deductions to take for weekly and monthly employees. For council tax too, at the bottom you can see just this little message here. So where the attachable earnings exceed the highest entry shown in the table, so that will be £2,020 for monthly, £505 for weekly. So where that exceeds those amounts, you should take 50% of the excess. And then for monthly, for example, 17% of the earnings up to that maximum amount of £2,020. So I'll come back to this a little bit later. I'm going to be showing examples of calculations, and it kind of will put it a bit more into context at that point. But these legislation tables are really handy. They can also help you to establish what type of attachment you've received. So if you have been given information with tables, but you're not quite sure which category to use or which attachment type it is, what I would advise is coming to Payroll here, so coming to the company legislation, and just take a look down this list. Change the attachment type in the drop down and just compare and just double check which tables you're going to need to use, and that will just help you to determine the attachment type that you're going to need. But that is the company legislation there, and that is where you'll find that. So what actually counts as earnings then when it comes to attachments? Well, it is most payments that are subject to tax and national insurance that should be included in the attachable pay. So this will include wages and salary, including bonuses and overtime, holiday pay as well, also pension payments. So if the employee is being paid a pension through an occupational scheme, and then also statutory sick pay too. Now this is the only statutory payment that counts as attachable pay, so just bear that in mind. What's not included is things like statutory redundancy pay, maternity, paternity and adoption pay. So they aren't included. As I said, sick pay is the only statutory payment which is. As always, though, I have linked more information on this on the bottom of this slide. If you would like to read a little bit more about attachment of earnings orders in England and Wales, just click that link there. You can also find it on the Help Centre. But I just wanted to kind of set the scene with attachments, start with a little bit about the types of attachments that you can have, how the deduction could be calculated, and then also just what counts as earnings when it comes to attachments too. But I do want to move on to probably one of the main sections of the webinar now, which is going to be how to set up and assign attachments. So when you actually receive an attachment order for an employee, you'll first of all need to decide whether or not to deduct a £1 admin fee. If you are, there is going to be a drop-down menu against each of the attachment types where you'll be able to select yes or no. So you'll see on that left-hand screenshot there, you do have the option of selecting yes for an admin fee. You do also have the option of adding something called a replacement description for the attachments. This would replace the text on the pay slips and various reports, and I'll show you how to do that a bit later too. Just to kind of make it a bit more clear, so if there are some names of the attachments where you're not quite sure what they are, or you think maybe the employee isn't going to be quite sure what it is if it's showed on the payslip, you do have the option of changing what it's called there. You will also need to check that your pay elements are set up correctly and subject to attachments when necessary. So on the right-hand side there, you can see tick boxes for community charge, council tax and other attachments. You just need to make sure that the relevant pay elements are set up if they do count towards taxable pay. So if they're subject to tax and national insurance, for example, most likely they will need to be subject to attachments and things too. So let's have a look at setting this up then, and I'll show you these settings. So back to payroll, and I am actually going to stay in the company tasks, but this time instead I'm going to go to pay elements. So all the different pay elements and deductions and things I've got set up in the company are in here. You'll also notice this attachment of earnings orders tab. So this is a screenshot that I had on the slides, and we've got all the different types of attachments here. We've got that admin fee column where we can specify if we want to take an admin fee. We've also got the replacement description column too. Now, as you can see, I do actually want to charge an admin fee for council tax attachments. So I've changed this drop down to select yes already. Dead easy to do so, but totally up to you whether you do or don't. Now, as for descriptions, I am actually happy with the majority of these descriptions. I think the employee would know what they are, but just a couple that I'd like to change. So I do want to change the 1971 priority and 1971 non-priority. I don't really feel like the employees would know what this is, so I do want to change how that shows on the payslip. And all you need to do is type that in. So I'm going to change the name to priority AEO, or attachment of earnings order, and non-priority AEO. There we go. I've added that replacement description in, and I would just need to click OK to save that. So it makes a bit more sense to me. I do think it's a little bit more descriptive that it's an attachment of earnings order. So I'm happy with everything in here. I'm now going to go to the pay element settings, so just back to the payments tab. And as you can see, I've got a pay element for overtime, commission and expenses. Now, overtime and commission, these are subject to tax and national insurance. Therefore, they should be included in attachable pay. So I'm just going to double check the settings to make sure that they are. We'll start with overtime and I'll click edit. And yeah, as I can see, I've got those tick boxes ticked on the right hand side. So that means they are going to be included towards community charge, council tax and other attachments too. So that's exactly what I need to see. Same again with commission. We'll click edit and they should be ticked. Yep, on the right hand side, so that's fine too. But lastly, for expenses, this pay element is not subject to tax and national insurance. So I can see tax and national insurance is not ticked there. This also means it's not going to be subject towards any type of attachments there either. So I don't want this to count towards attachable pay. Now, a little tip as well, if you are troubleshooting why an attachment isn't deducting, it's totally worth checking these pay element settings just to check whether they're subject to attachments. If they're not, that would likely be why it's not deducting as expected. So double check these settings if things aren't quite looking as expected. But that is your pay element settings. And at this point, you are now ready to assign the attachments to the employees. I've got 3 attachments that I'd like to add. one to each of these employees, and you can do this via the employee's record. So if I open them up, and starting with employee number 1, we're going to go to the Employment tab, and then bottom left you've got the option for Pay Elements. You've then got a tab in here for Attachment of Earnings Orders, and this is where you'll be able to input the details for the attachment that you've received. So my first employee, they've received a council tax attachment. So from this drop down, I'll be able to select the relevant attachment type. It's not a Welsh attachment of earnings, so it's just going to be the reference 7 for council tax. Click OK, and we can see it kind of pre-populates a few of those boxes there now. Now, as we saw in the legislation earlier, council tax is an attachment which uses tables. So that has actually ticked this box at the bottom of the window. And this tick box is just telling Payroll to use the rates tables for those attachment types that calculate using the tables that I showed you in the legislation earlier. We then have what's called the normal deduction rate and the protected earnings. Now, even though I am clicking in these boxes, I can't edit these. So because it's council tax, the deduction rate is calculated for us using the tables, and the protected earnings is a percentage based on the band. So I'm not able to change that. That's kind of set in stone for us. But something I can edit is the total attachment amount, which I've been told is £5,500. The order issue date as well is something I need to input, which was just the 1st of May. And you will also have something called an order reference number, and that'll just be on the information that you got. Which is just a nice simple number there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of course, yours will probably be different to that. But yeah, that's all set up for my first employee. And what that's going to do is deduct the council tax attachment until this total attachment is reached, or until I enter the order end date. So if you've been notified to stop the attachment, entering an end date in here is going to stop that from calculating. So first attachment is done. I'm going to move on to my next employee now. And same again, in the Employment tab, we're going to go to Pay Elements and Attachment of Earnings Orders. This employee has a child support attachment that I need to add. Now, I have been told that it's got a normal deduction rate and that there's protected earnings of 60%. So because of those protected earnings of 60%, I know that this is a more recent child support attachment type, which is actually going to be Child Support 2012, so reference number 14. Again, select that from the drop-down. This one does use a normal deduction rate. You'll see I am able to edit this, which I've been told is £240. But again, you'll notice I'm not able to change that protected earnings, and that's because the protected earnings for Child Support 2012 is set to 60% of the attachable pay. I'm not able to edit that. Something as well with child support, of course, this does tend to be an ongoing attachment too. There's not normally a total amount. So if that's the case, you can leave this as 0. And what that'll mean is it's going to keep deducting the necessary amount until I'm instructed to stop the attachment, in which case, as I mentioned before, you'll enter the order end date to stop it. Again, let me just change this date, issued on the 1st of May. And again, a reference number 2. So with child support, you do need to create something called a deduction schedule to send to the child maintenance people. So I'm just going to enter a reference for that too. And that is everything I need to do for this second attachment. Great, so last attachment that I need to add, this time to employee number 3. Back to Pay Elements and Attachment of Earnings Orders. This employee has been given a non-priority attachment. We were given a normal deduction rate and protected earnings, but we weren't told that it was priority. So as a result, I'm just going to assume that it's the non-priority. Notice as well, this is the new names that we gave them. So these used to be called 1971 priority and 1971 non-priority, but we gave the replacement description, and that's what it's now showing as in the program. I'm going to select the non-priority one. I'm going to enter the normal deduction rate, which is going to be £150 per period. This time I am able to enter protected earnings, which is going to be £1,000. and then the total attachment, which is £3,000 for this employee. And then same as the rest, just the order issue date there too. Now at the bottom, you will notice that this tick box is not ticked to use tables. For this attachment type, that is correct. This attachment doesn't use tables. Of course, it does use that normal deduction rate instead, as we've entered there. So I'm all okay to click save, and then just save the record. So that's the attachments all set up, and I've assigned them to 3 employees. I've set up the admin fee for the council tax attachment in the company pay elements. I did also add replacement descriptions for a few attachments too, which is just done in the same place. And then what we did, we assigned those attachments in the employee's record. So employment tab, and then pay elements, and then you'll have the tab there for attachment of earnings orders. From there, it's just filling in the information. So you'd select the attachment type, and then fill in whether it's got a normal deduction rate, protected earnings, etc. Remember as well, just to double check that tick box at the bottom right. Just make sure that is ticked if the attachment type uses tables, such as council tax, or direct earnings attachments, DEAs as well. But with them assigned and ready to go, that does bring us on to processing attachments, where we can check that they're being deducted in our next pay run. So back in Payroll, I've already set my process date to my next pay date, which I can just check in the bottom right there, 31st of May 2025. I've got a monthly payroll, so I'm just going to go ahead to enter payments and just check that these attachments are calculating and kind of explain a little bit about how they're getting to those figures too. So just to my payroll tasks and then enter payments. And it's just going to start with the first employee that I've got highlighted, so employee number 1. We can see I've got their salary here as normal. That's all fine. But I'm going to go ahead to the attachments tab just to check the information in here. So we can see that council tax attachment. We can see the attached value being calculated for me, £412.62. Of course, I've got that admin fee, which I selected for this attachment. And then the attachable earnings too. So the attachable earnings for the employee, this is the gross pay, takeaway, tax and national insurance. And then next column, you've got this just showing the amount that's actually being deducted. So that could be different to the attached value, depending on things like protected earnings. So how did it get to £412.62 then? So this does depend on the tables and the employee's earnings. Just want to go and double check those tables in the legislation again. So remember that was for a council tax attachment. If we go to company and legislation, and then AEO rates. Again, I'm just going to make sure I've got council tax selected in this list. Perfect. And for my monthly employee with attachable earnings in excess of £2,020, it's going to be 17% on earnings up to this amount. But for anything over, which my employee does have, it's going to take 50% of that excess. So let's go ahead and work this out then. If we go back to enter payments, and just to the attachments tab, let's have a look. So the attachable earnings for this employee, £2,158.44. We need to take away that £2,020, which was the maximum on that table, to find out the excess. So we've got £138.44 excess, and we need to find 50% of this, which is £69.22. So keep that number in mind, that's the 50% of the excess. We now need to work out 17% of the earnings up to £2,020. So times 17% equals £343.40. We'll add on that 50% of the excess again, so £69.22. Perfect, and that gives us the amount of £412.62. So that is how it's getting to that attached value. Now this amount deducted this period will be taken from the total attachment value, and that attachment will be calculated and deducted until the total has been reached, or, as I said before, if I've been notified to stop the attachment, in which case I would enter the order end date. But that's all calculating fine for me. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to move on to my next employee. My second employee, they've got the child support attachment, which is deducting an amount of £240 per period. Because it's not using the tables, I am able to edit this if I need to in here, but for this case, I'm just going to leave it as it is. We've got no admin fee specified for this attachment type. And then we've also got the attachable earnings as well. And the protected earnings for this attachment, remember, is 60% of this amount. So in this case, the full £240 can be deducted. Now, let's say there's been a little bit of a change of plan with this employee and they've actually fallen ill and taken the month on statutory sick pay. So if I went to the payments and removed their salary because they've been off, and then went to SSP and just added in that month of sickness, we can see we've got the SSP payable at £451.25. And let's go to the attachment now. We can see the attachable earnings is the SSP amount plus the refund, the rebate here of tax. So let's just check it now. I just want to double check how it's calculating. So attachable earnings, £570.65. 60% of this is the protected earnings, which is £342.39. Now we can actually see that the net pay cannot go below this, which is why the net pay is showing us this figure in the bottom right. As a result, though, it's not able to take that full £240 that we specified. It's actually only taken £228.26 instead, and carrying forward the rest of it, £11.74 into the next period. So assuming the employee has sufficient attachable pay next period, this carried forward amount can be taken on top of the normal £240 normal deduction rate. So again, I'm happy with this one. It's got that carried forward amount, which I will show you a little bit. I'll kind of move forward at the next month and just show you it carrying that forward. Final employee. This was the employee with the non-priority attachment of earnings, taking £150 per period, and in this example, the protected earnings was £1,000. So as we can see, way above that for the net pay, so it's able to take that full £150. But again, let's have a little bit of a change of plan here. Let's say that they were on reduced pay this month for some reason. I'm just going to go back to the payments tab and change their normal salary. So instead of £2,500, just going to change it there to £1,200. So now when I check the attachment, it can't take the full amount, as that would take it below the protected earnings of £1,000. So £128.10, that's the maximum that it can take this period. Now, something that is different with this example compared to the last one, this one does not have a carried forward amount, and that's because it's a non-priority attachment. If it was a priority attachment, there would be a carried forward amount, and then of course, if there was sufficient pay next period, it would be able to take that as well. But I'm happy with this. All of the payments are done and I'm happy with how they're calculating. And at this point, I'm just going to move on with my payroll. There are a couple of different pre-update reports that I'd like to show you. So if I just go to the pre-update reports, first thing I want to show you is the pay slips for the employees. Just the standard laser 2 per A4 sheet. So we'll let this load up for those 3 employees, and I just want to show you the attachments on there. Make this a little bit bigger for you. Great, so employee number 1, I can see they've got that council tax attachment there. It was able to take a full amount of £412.62. Employee number 2, that was a child support 2012, which remember has that protected earnings of 60%. And they were on sick for the whole month, so it wasn't able to take that full amount of £240. It was only able to take £228.26, but it did have a carried forward amount for the next period. And then lastly, just employee number 3. This was the employee with that non-priority AEO. Notice as well, this is the replacement description that we added at the beginning of the webinar, just so it shows a little bit more clearly for myself and for the employee too. And again, it wasn't able to take that full amount. Instead, it's only able to take £128.10. But just a reminder, because it's a non-priority attachment, there's not a carried forward amount into the next period. So it just shows nice and clearly there on the pay slips for them. Now, another report that you might want to run for attachment of earnings is actually just the attachment of earnings report, and you'll find this in the summary section. Just second on the list there, we'll preview this. And again, I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. So this is just going to show more detail on the attachments themselves, so information on the attachment amounts and totals. So you've got this one for employee number 1, just more information on the attachment for them. This will include any carried forward amounts too. So if we go to employee number 2, we can see their attachment information. We can see currently this period, that's how much is due, but it's not able to take the full amount. So we have got that information about the carried forward amounts, etc. And then same with employee number 3, we've got that information there. So if you do have a couple of employees with attachment of earnings orders, this will be really, really great just to kind of keep track of where they're at, how much they've paid into them, how much they've been deducted, how much is left on them, if it's just a total amount. So I would advise printing this, which you can do in the top left. You do also have the option of exporting. So if you just want to save this to your computer, maybe as a PDF, for example, you've got that option too. Perfect. But just a couple of reports I'd advise at that point if you do have attachment of earnings orders. So to be honest with you, that's the majority of processing attachments, but I do just want to finish up this demo by showing you the next pay period. So let me just quickly update my records. Just whiz through this for you. And I'm just going to change my process date to my next pay date, which would be 30th of June. And click OK. And again, we're going to go back to enter payments, and I'd like to show you those attachment values for the next period. Perfect. So first employee, there was no difference to their salary. So I can see that's still being deducted as normal, just with that full amount of £412.62. That's absolutely fine. Next employee though, let's go ahead and actually give them their wage back. Remember, I took that away from them because they were on sick. So I'll give them their wage back. And if we go back to attachments, we can see it is able to take the full amount of £240. It's also able to add on that carried forward amount of £11.74. So as a result, it's taken a little bit more this period just to account for last month. Happy with that. And finally, we've got the third employee. We did reduce their pay again, so let me put that back up to normal. Monthly salary of £2,500. And back to attachments, we can see because their attachable earnings has increased, it is able to take that full amount of £150. And remember, because it's a non-priority attachment, there was no carried forward amount, despite the fact it wasn't able to take the full amount last period. So that is processing attachments. I did just want to show a few examples so you could see them in action. I just want to finish on a bit of a top tip as well. So this is going to apply to employees who have multiple attachments. There is a particular order that you would need to deduct them in. So priority attachments first, obviously they have priority, in the date order that they were received, followed by non-priority. So currently, employee number 3 has got the non-priority AEO. Let's say they had another attachment come through, but this time for council tax. Now this is a priority attachment, so that it would take priority over the existing one. And I just want to show you how you'd be able to double check that in their record. So a little shortcut to the employee record here. We'll open up employee number 3. We're going to go to employment again, and then just back to where you'd set up the attachments. We can see we already set up that non-priority, but I've actually received another attachment for them, this time for council tax. So I'll select that from the drop down. Remember, this attachment does use tables, so let's tick that box for me at the bottom. I can't enter the normal deduction rate or protected earnings, but what I can enter is the total attachment of £2,500 and the order issue date, which was the 1st of June 2025. Great, so main thing I want to show you in here, you can see it's been added as priority number 2, but actually because it's a priority attachment, it should be first. If you ever need to switch them, you aren't able to just kind of change it to 1. You can't change that to priority number 1 because that's kind of duplicated the priority there. So if you did need to swap them round, what you'd be able to do is set the existing attachment to 0. Now you'll be able to change that priority to 1 and then just set that non-priority back to 2. So what you've kind of done is just switch them round there. And this now means that they're going to be in the correct order to deduct correctly. So just bear that in mind if you do have some employees with multiple attachments, it will be priority attachments first in the date order that they were received, followed by non-priority. And you will need to just double check that order in here. Perfect. So that is about it for the demonstration, but I do just want to go back to the slides and have a little bit of a recap of what we did there. I know there was a lot of information there. So the attachments tab in Enter Payments, this does give you all of the information in detail regarding the attachments. You've got the attached value on the left, so that's either going to be the normal deduction rate which you've added, or using the tables in the legislation. You've then got the admin fee, so that would be £1 if you've set that up. You've got the attachable earnings, so that's the pay remaining after tax and national insurance. And then you've also got the the amount deducted, so that's what's actually being taken. And then if applicable, you'll have the amounts carried forward as well due to protected earnings. Remember, this is only for priority orders. But as always, I've linked more information on attachments at the bottom of these slides throughout the whole presentation. So please do download the handouts. You will have a copy of the presentation, all of the information on there. You will also be able to check out those links that I've put on too. So in terms of content, that does bring us mostly to the end, but we do have one last section of the webinar, which is actually our quiz. So totally optional, this one, it's only 3 questions, but it would be really, really great for you to get involved. And how it works is I'm going to run a poll for you on the screen. You're just going to be able to select and submit your answer. You'll have around a minute or so to do that. And then I'm going to share the results of each question and then, of course, the correct answer too. So 3 questions, about a minute to answer each of them. And let me get started with this. So, question number 1, that's just launching on your screen now. So question number 1 is, where can you find the attachment of earnings tables in Sage 50 Payroll? Is that in company, legislation and AEO rates? Is it company, pay elements and attachments? Or is it the employee record, pay elements and attachment of earnings? Where can you find the attachment of earnings tables in Sage 50 Payroll? So just select your answer there and click submit. Great, I can see those coming in now. I'll leave it open for about another 15 seconds. Great, it looks like most of you have got that right, so I've been doing my job correctly. A little bit longer. Fab, so that was, where can you find the attachment of earnings tables in Sage 50 Payroll? And let's go ahead and reveal that answer. Great, so 82% of you have said in company, legislation and AEO rates, and 82% of you are absolutely correct. That is where you'll be able to find the tables for attachment of earnings, as well as loads of other legislation too. So whether it's parental payments that you want to know a bit more about, student loans, even national insurance and things like that. Company and legislation, that's where you'll find all of it. Great, so well done to 82% of you. So that was question number 1. Moving on to question number 2 now. I'm just launching that on your screen. So question number 2, this is, which attachment type would you assign for a child maintenance attachment with 60% protected earnings? So which attachment type would you assign for a child maintenance attachment with 60% protected earnings? Is it going to be child support, deduction of earnings order, or child support 2012? Just remember there was 2 child support attachment types that you could have. So which of those 3 attachment types would you assign for a child maintenance attachment with 60% protected earnings? Fab, again, looks like most of you have got that right. A little bit longer till I reveal that answer. Fabulous. Okay, let me close that down now and share those results. So remember there are 2 child support attachment types. 10% of you have just said it was a child support one, but 87% of you have said child support 2012 and 87% of you are correct. That is the attachment type which will have that 60% protected earnings. So do just remember that. But of course the information that you receive about the attachment should have everything that you need on there. So well done to those of you who got that right. Great, so last question is just a short quiz, just to test your knowledge. This one's a true or false question. So question number 3, that should be coming on your screen now. True or false, if a non-priority attachment of earnings is not deducted due to protected earnings, it will be carried forward to the next period. Is that true or false? So if a non-priority attachment of earnings order is not deducted due to protected earnings, it will be carried forward to the next period. True or false? Great. So this was something I just went through in the demo most recently, so hopefully you remember that. Great. Looks like most of you have voted now. Great. Let me close that down now. Thank you to those of you participating there. So, true or false, if a non-priority attachment of earnings is not deducted due to protected earnings, it will be carried forward to the next period. And that is actually false. So well done to 65% of you who said false. If it's non-priority, there's not going to be a carried forward amount. However, if it was a priority, so if it was instead the priority attachment of earnings order or even the council tax attachment, that would have a carried forward amount. So just something to bear in mind there. But well done to 65% of you. And thank you just in general for your participation there. Perfect. So that does bring us to the end of the main content for attachments. But before we do wrap things up, I do just want to go through a little bit of further support with you as well, just before you kind of move on and get on with the rest of your day. So webinar-wise, we do have loads of different webinars throughout the year for Sage 50 Payroll. Me and Duncan do loads of different topics. Lots coming up in the next few months as well. So we've got Mastering Mistakes, which is actually tomorrow at 2 p.m. We've actually got a brand new webinar badge series as well throughout June. So just to tell you a little bit more about that pensions badge series, I do just want to introduce you to my colleague Matt. He's going to tell you a little bit more about that series in this short video. So let me play that and I will be back in a minute or so to go through the rest of the further support.
Get ready to earn your pension discovery badge with Sage 50 Payroll. Join us this June for our fantastic new webinar series where you'll learn everything you need to know about pensions to get you ready to confidently process pensions for your employees. With 7 live sessions and a fun learning quiz in the last session. Whether you're new to pensions or a dab hand, we have something for everyone. Here is what we've got lined up for you. Make a strong start to your pension processing with foundational knowledge on the basics of pensions and salary sacrifice pensions in Sage 50 Payroll. Explore how pension contributions are calculated and how your employees are assessed for automatic enrolment. We'll also take you through our 3 most popular sessions: navigating enrolment, getting started with pensions module, and using pensions data exchange to send your pension data to your provider with ease. And lastly, backed by popular demand, test your knowledge with our pensions discovery quiz to see what you've learned across the sessions. Now, how do you get your hands on your Pensions Discovery digital badge? Simply attend 5 out of 7 of the live sessions and our quiz to earn your badge. And don't forget, you get free access to our new Credible portal to manage your badges, so you can quickly and easily share your badge on socials for everyone to see. Don't miss out. Secure your spot and join us for an unforgettable learning experience this June by signing up at sage.co.uk/webinars. We'll see you there.
Great, that's just me back again, and that was just a little bit more about the Pensions Discovery Badge that we've got for you in June. So that is actually starting next week. Really excited to get started with those sessions. But yeah, in terms of more further support, we've always got the Help Centre for you. So that's sage.co.uk/help. All of the different knowledge-based guides and support guides that I've included on the slides have came from this Help Centre. Really, really great resource there. We've also got a whole webinar section on there where you've got recordings of all of the previous sessions that we've done. So if you do want to watch any of those, please feel free to. And if you do need to get into contact with our technical support, for example, you do have all of the different contact options on the Help Centre too. And lastly, Sage University. So here you're able to set up a free account and access different e-learning and bite-sized learning courses, as well as earning product certification too. Great way to expand your knowledge on Sage 50 Payroll, but also if you've got any other products with us, so Sage 50 Accounts, Sage HR, for example, you are able to learn about those too. But yeah, in terms of content, that has brought us to the end of the webinar today. So thank you so much for your time today. I know I've run over by a couple of minutes. If you are leaving us now, remember you can download the handouts, and also feel free to copy and paste any of the Q&A. I know I've not managed to get around to all of them just yet, but if you do see any questions or answers that you want to keep for future reference, please feel free to keep those. And last ask from me, there will be a short survey that you get as you'll exit the webinar. If you do have just a moment to fill that out, or you've got any comments and things to leave, I would really, really appreciate that. We do read all of the feedback. It does go a long way. So yeah, thank you in advance for that. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and answer those questions. So I'll keep the webinar open while I do so. If you have asked me a question, just stick around and you will be able to get a response before I end the webinar. But yeah, for the rest of you, do keep an eye on your emails for a recording of the webinar coming through. You'll be able to watch that as many times as you need. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and we'd love to see you on another webinar very soon, hopefully the Pensions Discovery Badge. But yeah, on behalf of me and the rest of the webinar team, we'll see you next time. It's goodbye for now.